Hello, welcome to WorkRise Shorts. I'm Todd Green, the Executive Director at WorkRise. We're a research to action network focused on jobs, workers, and mobility, and we're hosted at the Urban Institute. Now, today we're having a great conversation. What I've been looking forward to with David Autor. He's the Ford Professor of Economics at MIT. So today we're discussing his research, which looks at applying AI to rebuild middle class jobs. David, welcome, and it's great to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Todd.
Okay, there's been so much in the news, David, about AI and what it means for real people and their lives. So tell me, what was the exact problem of your research? What was the problem you were hoping to solve with this recent research about this paper?
Sure. So, I think when most people think about AI, they think about, well, what jobs is it going to take? What are the things that it's going to do that we're doing, so we won't be doing them anymore? And I think that framing in terms of automation and removal of tasks is not totally off base, but it misses an incredibly important point, which is that most technologies and tools are valuable to the extent they actually create new capabilities and enable us to do things that we weren't able previously to do. So for example, just to be very concrete, right? If you were to automate all of ancient Greece, you wouldn't have modern America. You just have Greece without horses, right? Uh, you wouldn't have flight, you wouldn't have penicillin, you wouldn't have telecommunications, right? You wouldn't have indoor plumbing, you wouldn't have electrification. And so new tools usually allow us to do different things that we previously could not do, like fly or communicate over great distances. And they also require additional expertise, right? So, an air traffic controller, for example, without a two-way radio, a GPS, and a radar is just a person standing in a field staring at the sky, right? Many of the important jobs in the world depend on knowledge of a set of powerful tools, right? Whether you're doing construction, whether you're doing medicine, whether you're doing electrical work and skilled repair, whether you're doing law or marketing. And so I wanted to think about how this tool what it could enable people to do and who could be enabled by that tool. And the argument that I lay out in that article, which I want to say is a scenario, it's not a prediction, right? It's a possibility, is that a lot of the valuable work in the economy in the world is decision-making work, right? It's essentially,
Yeah.
If you're a doctor, you're a decision maker. If you're an attorney, you're a decision maker. If you are a plumber or an electrician, you're a decision maker. You're dealing with high stakes situations that are each unique. You have a body of formal knowledge, and then you have, a lot of practice and experience that helps you make the right decision. And the stakes are high, right? You could do it well and it works great. You save someone's life, you make a great building, whatever. You could do it badly and someone dies, or there's an electrical fire, or right, there's all kinds of scope. And so we're paid often to make good decisions in those circumstances. And what AI is potentially very useful for is a decision support tool, because unlike previous technologies that follow rules and procedures, AI can learn from unstructured information and draw out patterns, right? It learns what philosophers call tacit knowledge, information that is not expressed in rules, but is all around us, right? Which is how most of us learn, right? When you learn to ride a bicycle, right, you didn't study physics, or gyroscopes, right? Your parents put you on a bike on a gentle hill and pushed and said,
Yeah.
good luck. Hope that works out. But
All
that's a
right.
lot of our learning actually is through osmosis, right? And we never had a tool that could replicate that. We never had a tool that could actually learn from unstructured information and make inferences. And AI is such a tool. Now, that doesn't mean it's an oracle or it's infallible or anything. It can help guide. It can help provide what I'm going to call guidance, meaning say, have you thought about this? Consider that, and guardrails of don't don't do that. Like, don't put these two drugs together for the same patient, right? Don't prescribe both drugs, or make sure you shut this thing off before you stick your hands into it, etc. And so I think AI, in the good scenario, AI can enable more people to do more valuable decision-making work. I'm going to give you a super concrete example, and feel free to interrupt me if I'm just speaking one long sentence for 10 minutes. Uh,
No, please go on. This is quite
uh,
interesting.
okay. So, an example I like to draw on, which does not have to do with AI specifically, is the profession of nurse practitioner. So, nurse practitioners are registered nurses who have an additional master's degree and some additional training practice that enables them to do things that were previously only done by people with MDs. So they can diagnose, they can treat, and they can prescribe pharmaceuticals. Um, Now, this is a great thing. It's a great job. It pays well. 20 years ago, there were almost none of them. Now there's several hundred thousand in the United States. Their median income is $130,000 a year. And it's great for patients, right? Because you don't have to wait all day to see your pediatrician or so on, right? Many times you need someone who can take your vital signs, right? Make an appropriate diagnosis and prescribe some medication. You're on your way. Um, so what enabled that to actually happen was it was really a social movement. Nurses back in the 1960s, mostly women, said, "Hey, we're being underused here. There's more we could do." And they fought to create a curriculum and a credential and a scope of practice that enabled them to do that. But at this point, they're very strongly supported by technology, right? Electronic medical records, right? Diagnostic software, prescription software that's looks for drug interactions and so on. And in the future, you can imagine more people with appropriate foundational training could do a broader variety of care tasks using better tools. Right? And I think that applies not just in medicine, although I think medicine's a great example. It applies in education, it applies in software development, right? Many more people will be able to do coding nowadays or in the years in the future, without a bachelor's degree in computer science. It applies to design. If a contractor could do more engineering work in your house, right, without having to get, by using the right tools, that would be great. If a less expensive lawyer could help you draw up your will or your taxes or anything, that would be great. And so the best case scenario, in my opinion, is one in which AI extends expertise. It allows people with foundational training and practice to do a broader set of things by building on the skills they have and giving them better decision support tools to do that.
Yeah, I really like this example of the doctor's office. I just went to the doctor's office, and that made me think about how are they already using these types of tools to extend that. And I didn't have to wait in the doctor's office, so maybe I'm thinking they have been doing this extending work. I guess I want to maybe just go pivot for a moment to talk a bit about you've explained kind of the problem and or the opportunity. I guess it would be a better way of stating this. And as you think about lower wage workers and middle wage workers outside of this, are there challenges or headwinds that they might face beyond the opportunities? I mean, I definitely see this opportunity for mobility. You talked about increased earnings, et cetera. Are there challenges, though? Anything we should be worried about on the other side?
Yeah. So first, let's agree the last 4 decades have not been good decades for middle wage workers, right? Because a lot of those middle wage workers were in offices, they were doing administrative support, clerical, or they were on assembly lines doing skilled production work. And a lot of that work, because it followed, procedures and rules that were actually formalized, right? It was quite susceptible to computerized automation, right? It takes real skill to do bookkeeping. It takes real skill to do uh, spell checking and typing and formatting and layout, but many of those things, they are formal procedures. And so they were susceptible to computers doing them instead of people. And so that has really hollowed out the middle of the labor force, right? It's pushed people to the extremes, either if you're fortunate into the professional, technical, and managerial decision-making jobs, highly paid, they've grown, and their earnings have grown, or increasingly, if you are not able to, or you don't have the education, training, or opportunity to do those things, many people find themselves in services like food service, cleaning, security, entertainment, recreation. And that's socially valuable work, like a crossing guard or a daycare teacher or a bus driver. However, it's poorly paid because it requires, in general, little certification or training, meaning many people can be productive at that work relatively quickly. So that tends to be low paid. So the opportunity would be that more people the majority of US workers do not have a college degree, right? At most 4 in 10. If the other 6 in 10 or some portion of them could say, hey, I could do more in the way I could extend my skills in skilled repair, or I could get a medical vocational certificate and do x-ray technology or things like that. Or if I could now do some website development with the right tools, right? That would be the good scenario. And I hope more of that we will be able to accomplish more of that. I think it takes intention. The bad scenario, of course, is that essentially, um, you know, people with the right tools become that much, more self-sufficient. Like, well, now now that I'm a medical doctor, I can now do everything because I have these tools. I don't need supporting staff, or many of us, for example, many people no longer have administrative assistants, right? Their computers are administrative assistant, and yeah, they have to do their own typing now. They don't have anyone typing for them. On the other hand, typing is sort of part of writing and thinking at this point, so not a problem. So I think that the bat and the and there historically, employers have responded to the, recent decades of technological changes by basically making work more and more sort of credentialed and saying, well, we don't, we really need college graduates. There's going to be problem solving. We can't afford. And uh, and so if those barriers don't come down, then then we're missing this opportunity. And what makes those barriers come down? Well, part of it sometimes it's the cost itself. You say, oh, wow, we can do this with less expensive people. But sometimes it requires an active imagination to say, oh, we could structure this work differently to bring in a different set of people and use them well. They wouldn't necessarily be as expensive, and we have good tools. But I think that, it takes design, it takes intention. My friend Josh Cohen, who used to be at MIT, now is at Apple University. He says, the future is not a prediction problem, it's a design problem, right? We should be designing the future that we want to inhabit, not just sort of waiting for it to happen to us.
Yeah, thank you for that, and that's an interesting way for us to really take control of the future. And I know AI is so vexing for so many people, and what to make of it. So I think your explanation is really powerful. So you talked about that this isn't necessarily that this provided a lot of your prognostications, but I just want to give you a moment to find out if there were any specific key research findings or anything of that nature that you'd like to elevate from that work.
Sure. Yeah. So, there's a number of, studies that you could think of just really as case studies at this point that really sort of underscore some of these points. So, for example, one of them is a case study done by Eric Brynjolfsson from Stanford, my colleague Danielle Lee of MIT, and her PhD student Lindsay Raymond, that looks at generative AI used for customer support work. And the example they study is a firm that supports an enterprise software product. You can think of it runs your payroll, your inventory, and so on. And when customers get stuck, they chat interface. And these are like high intensity encounters, right? The typical one lasts 20 minutes to a half an hour. Often the customer's business like can't operate without this tool. And so it's a little bit of a road rage phenomenon, actually, as you would imagine these chat interfaces are. And so this tool that was rolled out, and essentially what it does is it reads the customer's chats, and then it suggests possible responses. And you can accept one, you don't have to use it, you can modify it. But interestingly, what they found is it actually sped up the process, but not just by just making the call shorter, but by accelerating the rate at which people went from novice to expert. So it used to take 10 months to reach peak productivity. Now it takes 3 to 4 months. And workers are actually more productive than they used to be. And interestingly, part of so it doesn't eliminate expertise, but it makes people get to expert faster. It also reduced the quit rate in these jobs. These are high intensity jobs. It's a lot of emotional labor, and you take a lot of abuse from customers. Uh, and they found that actually the tool reduces the level of hostility from customers to workers and from workers to customers. It actually does a lot of the emotional labor. It does a lot of the, oh, I can see why you're frustrated here, Todd. This software is really important to your product. Let's get some details so we can get on this right away. Like, it does a lot of that work. It's actually amazing. So in some instances, what you see is it basically reduces the differential between more expert and less expert people in skilled work, right? In writing, in some types of analysis, in customer support. So part of what it does you see some instances of this kind of leveling up where it takes hard work and it makes, it makes people who are decent at it, somewhat better. It doesn't necessarily make the best person better. It may save them time, but it may not improve the quality of their work. But improving the quantity is a benefit itself. We also see, by the way, examples where it works counterproductively. So my colleagues, Nikhil Agarwal and Tobias Sauls, and two co-authors have a study of AI use in radiology. And, radiology is a great application of AI because looking at scans and making diagnoses, right, there are not formal rules for that, but it can learn from example just like people do. And if you look at the software, it's just working from the scans alone. And most radiologists use scans and other ancillary information. But looking at the scans alone, it's as good as 6 out of 10 radiologists.
Mm.
So you might think, oh, well, then therefore, if you put the radiologist with the software, that's going to be better still. Turns out that's not true. The radiologists do worse with the AI than they do on their own. And the reason you might say, well, how could that happen?
Yeah.
Well, the reason is, I'll give you a long story and the short story. So the short answer is they're not well trained in how to use it. The long answer is this, that they have, correlated uncertainty. So when the radiologist is certain of the diagnosis, in general, the software is too. When the radiologist is uncertain, in general, the software is too, right? They're looking at the same information, not surprising. But what happens is when the software is uncertain, the radiologist is uncertain, the radiologist tends to defer to the software. And when the software is certain and the radiologist is certain, the radiologist tends to override the software. And it turns out that actually, when they're uncertain, the radiologist probably has more contextual information. They probably ought to make the call themselves. When they're both certain, the radiologist ought to ask themselves, well, why is it that this machine that has actually looked at, infinite numbers of X-rays thinks
Yeah.
something different from what I do? Let's sort of, negotiate that and figure out what this is. So the explanation is it actually takes a form of expertise to use this tool, right? The tool is a black box, right? It doesn't explain what it's doing. It doesn't know what it's doing. uh,
Yeah.
and so it's going to, like most tools, they are, what it was, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Knowing how to use the tool is itself a skill. And so I think people will have to develop that judgment. And that will be an important kind of skill set, is to be able to, interact productively and safely with these kind of powerful tools that make lapses of judgment and make all kinds of errors, and they're not going to get error free. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you've given that one example is quite interesting, but of course, many others about how workers themselves can advance and how our world is can be improved. But that was quite compelling to see how that worked between the human and the machine, and what comes up out of it. But I guess the upstart for me is that there's an opportunity for our world to be better. But having said that, in the examples that you provided, it's quite clear to me how employers, whether or not it's a hospital system or whether or not it's a manufacturer, et cetera, I really get how employers are best positioned to advance this research that you've been doing. But I'm just curious about, are there other sectors or workers themselves or advocates who might be positioned to advance your research? And then what would you expect to change?
Sure. Well, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So
it's a
first of all, I
big
should say
question.
that there are downsides and risks, and these tools can be abused, right? And I think there actually some of this really requires direct regulation. So, I think, this won't make me popular with everybody, but I think AI is doing a lot of intellectual property theft and reselling it, right, in the form of, writing and creative tasks and so on. And I really think that requires a legal renegotiation. But it also can be used abusively for monitoring, right, for actually, having machines that, think about like the Hollywood writers, right? They didn't want the AI learning from them and then doing what they do, right? Imagine, your AI is monitoring your every action, and then after a while, it's like, I got it. We don't
Yeah,
need Otter anymore. This machine can do that. And so I really think there are, it could be, and for monitoring, it's not even just like, what are they learning, but it changes the terms of negotiation between the worker and the firm. So I really think this is a place where, uh, labor representatives need to be involved in setting the rules of the game. So I think that's extremely important. Um, I think the government should also lead in some ways, not by prescribing, but by investing, right? So in healthcare and education, those two sectors alone are, one out of every $5 that people spend. And half of that money is federal money or is public money, right? Who's paying for education? Who's paying for healthcare? Often, Medicare pays for a thing like 40% of all US healthcare at this point. So that gives that the public sector has the capability to say, well, let's invest in doing this well, or let's redesign how work is structured so that it creates more opportunity for people to develop credentials and do skilled work without all the work going to the very top, to the most expensive people. And that would be a really good investment. And we're in the space, right, of figuring this out. We really don't know. I don't know. I don't think most people know. It's going to be, we do a lot of groping around, right, to sort of figure out how do you use these tools well. But you have to, to find that out, you have to be willing to, you have to do experiments, you have to do R&D, and you have to have an idea of what you're shooting for, right? As opposed to just, saying, well, our goal is to automate stuff.
Yeah. Well, David, surely we can go on and on. Thank you so much today for sharing your work with us. David's paper on applying AI to rebuild middle class jobs is available from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Thank you for spending time with me today.
Thank you so much, Todd. I should also mention it's also available free online from Noema magazine, which is where it was published.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.